Welcome back to IDP Bets. My name is Johny the Greek. How's everybody doing? Happy week 9. Hope you guys had a good week 8. We got a very special episode and guest for you this week. Joining me is at ProfessorIDP on Twitter, Scott Soltis of the IDPShow.com. He is the author of the weekly streaming defensive line article, which is absolutely incredible. You guys should all be reading that. That is a work of art. He is a true degenerate, and he is also the author of the State of IDP survey each season. Scott, how are you, sir?
I'm doing well. I'm excited to be here. And, with the IDP, with the DL streaming that I've been doing all season, I haven't got to talk about too many well-rostered players that I like on the defensive line. So it's nice to not just have to look for diamonds in the rough and be able to talk some defensive linemen that most people have heard of, and they won't have to Google them to get a little bit of a background.
Yeah, I hear you. And it's same deal in cornerback land. I'll bring up Tyrek Funderburk, and people look at me like I'm crazy. So I hear you, buddy. All right. So before we get into it, just a reminder: these are not even suggestions. We're literally just discussing the bets we might be making personally. Set a limit and stick to it. For help with problem gambling, please call 1-800-GAMBLER. We did go 3-3 last week. Patrick was 2-1, and he would have been 3-0, except they moved that Kazir white line on us at the last second. So, better week than the week before. Progress, not perfection. Let's get started with our special guest, though. Scott, what do you got for your first favorite IDP bet, week 9?
Yeah, so all of my bets are going to be defensive lineman sack props. I don't know enough about projecting the other positions. I've been doing defensive lineman stuff for a few years now. So I was really looking for a few different markers and the players that would jump out. The first one for me is Dorrance Armstrong from the Washington Commanders. I think he has a nice matchup here. Everyone seems to have a nice matchup when they have to play the Giants. But when you look at some of the advanced metrics, one of the things that I was digging into today is PFF tracks how many pressures and how many sacks are the quarterback's fault to see which quarterbacks themselves are more prone to getting into danger and then getting sacked. Daniel Jones is running into pressures about twice a game. The Giants have also allowed 5 sacks per game, which is wild over the last 3 games. So thinking about just recent performances, the Giants are very vulnerable, and Jones is still the quarterback, because the other thing I didn't want to do was look at like the Browns, who have had a quarterback change, and you don't know how much was quarterback, how much was line. But with the Giants, Jones is vulnerable. And when you look across that defensive line for the Commanders, Dorrance Armstrong stands out. He came back from injury last week, immediately played 73% of snaps, which is a nice snap share. I like to see players that are going to have opportunities, because you might have a lot of talent like a Bryce Huff last year, but guessing the week where Bryce Huff was going to be a sack is just making the challenge even more difficult on yourself, because he was playing those very limited snap shares. So 73% snap share, 3 pressures last week in his return from injury. So I think Dorrance Armstrong is a pretty nice play for a sack prop this week.
Yeah, I'm with you on this. Everyone seems to be feasting against the Giants. And then, he's been pretty hot lately. He's had, I think he missed, last week, but had a whole bunch of weeks before that where he got over a quarter sack. 1 sack, 1.5, half a sack the week before that. So he's been trending in the right direction, it looks like.
Yeah, and in a bit of shameless self-promotion, he's been featured in my article a couple of times. That's how I first got familiar with him. I've been able to guess right on some good performances of his based on the metrics that I tend to use there, with the matchup for fantasy purposes, with the PFF grades, with the snap shares. And so I took a lot of those same logics that I've been using for identifying streamers and high quality defensive lineman plays, and then just added in a few more metrics that are more sack specific. And Armstrong really just jumped off the page at me.
Nice, beautiful. Well, hey, if the accuracy is anything like the article, we are sitting pretty. That's for sure. Good stuff. Alrighty, so for my first one this week, I'm going to go with Cody Farton Barton over 7.5 combined tackles at plus money, plus 105. So he's crossed this line in 2 of the last 3 games and 4 times overall this season. And this week he gets a Ravens team that is allowing 17.3 linebacker tackles per game. That's 10th overall for that ranking, but only 2 tackles per game off the best team with that ranking, Pittsburgh. So pretty close. Baltimore just lost a close one last week and are clearly the better team here. Vegas has them as a 10-point favorite, and they're at home this week. Baltimore has the better time of possession ranking. They'll very likely lean on Derrick Henry, like we've seen all season, against this Denver defense that is very stout against the pass, but less stout against the run. 4th overall against the pass, 7th overall against the rush. And we really haven't seen Denver go up against an offense as good as what Baltimore is going to bring to town this week, or rather stay in town this week. So I think Baltimore gets back to pounding the rock with Henry, and that'll put Barton in a pretty good situation to cross this lower line that is at plus money this week. Yeah, what do you think about this one, Scott?
Yeah, I like it. And it may be a little bit of wish casting because I'm someone who picked up Barton like last year as a plug and play replacement, and in Dynasty just held him. And so I'm actually starting him, I want to say, in 2 or 3 of my Dynasty leagues this week. So he's got the potential. The Ravens need to keep running the ball. I know Jackson's going to play this week, but he's dealing with back and knee, or I know he has 2 things that he's dealing with. So when he runs, he might not be as explosive when he runs, which means, I don't know Cody Barton's RAS, but I wouldn't imagine it's a 9.8 or a 9.9 or anything like that. But with Jackson hobbled a little bit, with big Derrick Henry, with as much as they should run the ball, I think he should be in a nice position to gobble up some tackles this week.
Yeah, I hope so. Yes, sir. All right, what do you got for number 2 for week 9?
Yeah, so this is a something's got to give kind of play. And it's LJ Collier, who is sort of split defensive end, plays a little bit of interior for the Arizona Cardinals. This week, they're taking on the Chicago Bears. I had mentioned that Daniel Jones runs into 2 pressures a game. Caleb Williams is a rookie in a lot of ways. He's done some nice things, but over the last 3 weeks, he's been running into an average of 4 pressures per game. So he's been putting himself in danger, but it hasn't been converted to sacks. So even though he has those 12 pressures that he himself has generated, so not the line missing tackles or anything, him holding onto the ball or just stepping up into trouble, 12 times, but only 2 sacks per game over the last 3 games. So this is a place where there could be some really nice regression closer to the mean, where if you're generating that many pressures, it's going to start costing you sooner rather than later. And the same goes for Collier. So I was talking about the matchup first, but Collier has 17 pressures on the season with 0 sacks. So 17 pressures isn't going to set the world on fire, but he is just incredibly unlucky with not being able to get all the way home. So I feel like there has to be some positive regression for the Bears allowing more sacks, given how much Williams puts himself in trouble, let alone just those random missed blocks and things that can happen on the offensive line. Couple that with Collier in a good position to have some nice regression. He is a movable piece, which I also like because there are some stronger parts and some weaker parts on that Bears offensive line. So far this season, he's played about 45% of his snaps on left edge, 25% in right edge, and then 27% over the tackles. So they can put him where they need to and where they can most exploit those matchups. The only thing that gives me a little bit of pause is he only played 60% of snaps last week, and 60 is still a respectable number, but you want to see closer to 70, 80, 90% of snaps so that someone's going to have a lot of opportunities. But hopefully, I know there's no odds out for him yet, but hopefully that means it's a pretty advantageous position for if he can finally at least get that first half sack of the season.
Yeah, I'm with you on this. I did something similar offensively this week with the betting, a regression back to normality bet, I call it. I went Jameis Winston over for an interception because he didn't.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, he didn't throw an interception last week, but he throws 1.25 a game and threw like 30 in 2019 or something. You know what I mean? So I love bets like that where we're due for something and it just hasn't hit yet. Like that's a good thing to take advantage of. Definitely.
Yeah, and I love this because you got like the double due. You got the Bears that are due to give up more sacks given the pressures that are being generated against them, and Collier due to finally get a sack given the pressures that he's put up. So I love, one of those, like Winston. As soon as you started saying an offensive bet and said James, I was like, okay, interception. It's got to be that, because I was thinking the exact same thing.
Yeah, not my first rodeo. I remember Jameis Winston. Good stuff. Good stuff. All right, so excuse me. So for number 2 for me, I'm gonna go TJ Edwards, linebacker, over 7.5 combined tackles at -145. So he's cleared this line in 3 games this season, which is not great, but I think he's in a good situation this week up against an Arizona team that allows 18.1 tackles per game to opposing linebackers. That's 7th overall and only 1.8 per game off the best in that category, so pretty close to first. Arizona loves to run the ball with James Conner or Kyler Murray. They are the 7th best rushing attack in the league. They're averaging 142 yards per game on the ground, and they hand it off about 27 times per game. That's a ton. That's beautiful. This is very clearly their offensive identity, right? Pound the rock, occasionally some deep shots to Harrison Jr., etc. So Edwards should be in a good position for a ton of run-stopping tackles with this in mind. And then when we add in those short passes that we've seen to Swift, to Roshan, to guys out of the backfield, we're looking even better. Beyond that, Vegas only has this as a 2-point spread, so they're not expecting either team to run away with this game, and that's a good thing, because that means the odds of a blowout and backup players coming in and jamming us up is reduced overall, and that's something that's messed with us a little bit lately too. I know it happened to Kazir White one week. It's happened to some other guys where they're right there, they're at the tackle line, and their team wins in a blowout, or they get blown out and they're pulled from the game and we don't have a chance to get over that line. So with this small spread, I think we're looking okay there. So Edmonds, Tremaine Edmonds may steal some tackles, but Jaquan Brisker is out this week. So we'll actually have less competition for tackles than we normally do. And the offensive style of Arizona, plus these other factors, I think sets Edwards up well to get over this line in week 9. What do we think of that one?
Yeah, just from a fantasy perspective, I like the Bears linebackers, whether we're talking about Edwards or Edmonds. I think I agree with you that Edwards is the better play just in general from a fantasy perspective. And so that translates to, the likelihood of getting the tackles. And, I haven't, part of focusing so much on defense is I'm not as up to date on all the offensive stats as I was for the first, 20 years that I did fantasy football. But I'd have to imagine Trey McBride is the second leading receiver for the Cardinals. And he has field stretching ability, but he's still a tight end. And so he's going to be matched up on a linebacker some of the time. So in addition to that run heavy style, mobile quarterback with an offense that features that tight end so heavily, because there's been a couple of games where Marvin Harrison has just completely disappeared. I think that he's in a good position to make not only those nice run stopping tackles, which are his bread and butter and really the bread and butter for tackle props in general, but when you add in that little extra, like you were talking about with the backfield passes that are coming out, and then Trey McBride being such a focal point of that offense, I think that can help you there too.
Yeah, and my apologies. I meant James Conner, not DeAndre Swift. I have not lost my mind. And yeah, great point there on McBride. He's coming off a massive game too, so he's clearly heating up. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll be honest, Edwards is so good. I wouldn't be surprised if he ran out there and tackled Swift and Roshan Johnson at least once, just to get that blood flowing and hype up the team. So, I'm all on board.
Love it. Beautiful. All right. What do you got for number 3?
Yeah, so for my third one, this is a guy who is really near and dear to my heart. He was featured in the DT Deep Dive articles 2 years ago and a little bit last year. And now he is just completely blown up, and I love to see it. It is Zach Allen for the Denver Broncos. He does have a line currently on DraftKings. He's plus 190 for over a quarter of a sack. So, Lamar Jackson is mobile. He's hard to get down. He runs into a couple of pressures whenever you're looking at sort of that metric. He's in the top half of the league over the past few weeks in terms of running into 2 pressures a game. Only allowing 2 sacks a game. So again, that's something else that feels like it could be prime for some opportunity for Allen. I love how Allen plays all the snaps. His worst game this season was still in the high 70s for snap percentages. Last week, he was at 97%. He's hit 100% already once this season. So he's going to be on the field. And I thought a little bit about the Broncos edges. The Broncos edges are awesome, but they have 4 of them that play at least 40% of snaps. And that makes me really nervous to put too much stock in any of them. I like Baron Browning as a potential dart throw defensive end streamer this week. But in terms of who I think is most likely to get a sack, which is what I like about this exercise rather than having to just look for those deep plays, to me, it's Zach Allen, especially when you think about a banged up Lamar Jackson, all the snaps he plays. He is incredibly mobile. About 65% of his snaps are from the right side, but he moves over to the left too. And so wherever, again, there's that more exploitable matchup, I look at him a lot like a Chris Jones in terms of he can get out wide if he needs to get out wide. They haven't needed him to do that because they have that 4 deep rotation now at that really outside edge position. So I think Zach Allen is in a prime position to keep his fantastic season going along. And I think that being in plus money for him to get even half of a sack is something that is attractive.
Yeah, I'm with you on this. And what kind of has blown my mind about Zach Allen is in MFL, he's a defensive tackle. In some other places, he's a defensive end or just a DL or whatever. But I was looking at total points so far this season. He's like the DT1 in a lot of places. He's absolutely killing it. And it's like very much under the radar. And he's gone over this line. What does he need? A half sack this week or something?
Yeah, that's it.
1, 2, 3, 4. That's 5 times I'm looking at right now. That's pretty good for sacks. That's really good. 5 good weeks out of 8 or whatever, 7 or 8. That's incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. And he's a tackling machine too. That's one of the nice things about him is, I know we're just thinking about like individual and I didn't look at his tackle prop, but he's part of the reason he has those great fantasy numbers isn't because he has all the sacks in the world. He's just a really consistent player. And like you said, with the expectation that the Ravens are going to get back to the run a little bit more this week after losing to the Browns last week, he's going to have opportunities to get sacks. Lamar is still going to be throwing it to some extent, but I don't know what his tackle number is. But if it's low enough, that would be attractive to me too, because he really is that all-around talent. Hopefully they sneak by and Barton has to clean up, but I could see him stopping some of those at the line of scrimmage too.
Yeah, hey, we'll take it. We'll take it. Let's just have Baltimore dominate time of possession like 40 minutes to 20, and we'll be fine.
Love it. Love it. 60, 70 defensive snaps. That'd be great.
Yeah. Beautiful. Good call there. Great player. Good call. Good price too. Very good price. All right, that takes us to number 3 for me. I'm going to go to cornerback land. I'm going to take Benjamin St-Juste over 4.5 combined tackles. This is on Underdog, so we don't have a price yet, but that should be out by Saturday. So he's cleared this line in 5 of 8 games this season, so that's pretty good to start. And he gets a Giants team. This still blows my mind, but it's still true through week 8, heading into week 9. That allows 16 cornerback tackles per game. That's second across the entire league. This is not, when I think of great passing attacks, I'm not thinking of the New York Giants, but they target their wide receivers a ton and they allow cornerback tackles a ton. So Benjamin St-Juste, I would think, would spend some time on Malik Nabers, and Nabers has been targeted 73 times in 6 games. That's over 12 targets a game. And it's not like Slayton or Robinson haven't been involved either. 72 for Robinson, 47 for Slayton through only 8 games. And as things stand, the Giants target their wide receivers the most out of any team in the entire league. That is spectacular for opposing cornerback production, especially Benjamin St-Juste, who's been one of the most consistent and productive cornerback options we've had in years. He does this year in and year out. So we'll hope these trends continue in week 9. And if they do, we'll be in a pretty good spot to get this over for St-Juste. What do you think about that one?
Yeah, I'm never going to second guess you on anything related to a cornerback. So I'll just co-sign everything you just said. Now, but I think the fact that the Giants, Tyrone Tracy has been running it a little bit better. And so, that may start eating into some of that eventually. And I was just checking. It looks like he did clear the concussion protocol. So it's going to be him in the backfield this week and not Singletary again. So I think that might do some things, but you're right. It has been a lot of dinking and dunking for Daniel Jones out to wide receivers. And, he has targeted Neighbors. It's crazy to me. I actually got around to watching one of the non-IDP fantasy football preview shows on ESPN, and they had Neighbors as like wide receiver 4. When did this happen? And then I looked it up and I saw, he has almost 100 targets already. This is wild. So yeah, I think if St. Juste is going to be on him a good bit, that alone is going to be beneficial. Plus all the peel offs to get the dump offs to the running backs. They don't really involve the tight ends too much, so that's not too much of a concern of the linebackers or the edges that might be doing some coverage on them. So yeah, that sounds like a good play to me, and I'm gonna go see if he's available in any of my deeper leagues to add and play.
Yeah. Hey, got to take advantage of those matchups. That's it. It's the same thing you do on defensive line. We do in cornerback land. Just play the matchups, aim for the most points every week instead of just settling for what's there, what you already got. All righty. We got. I know we do, but let's tell the people. We got some bonus bets this week. Scott, why don't you lead us off with that? What do you got for a bonus bet for us?
Yeah, so my first bonus bet is another guy who started off in that DL streaming category a couple of years ago, and I'm just really excited to see his progress. Nnamdi Madubuike, sorry, I remember looking that up so many times so that I didn't say it wrong, and then of course I said it wrong. Madubuike is having a down year, and everyone knew he was going to have a down year because he had such an amazing year last year. But that doesn't mean that you should be writing him off. The guy has, 25 pressures so far this season, which I believe is 4th most among interior defenders, and only 3 sacks to show for it. So it's not like he's forgotten how to play football. It's not like he's suddenly not performing. He's just not filling up the stat sheet the way that he had been. But Bo Nix has been a pressure magnet. He's been pressured 12 times by his own creation over the past 3 weeks. And all 4 of the sacks that he's taken over the last 3 weeks have been his fault, according to PFF. So when you look at the pressures allowed and sacks allowed, all of them he's responsible for. So in addition to him just putting himself in situations, which is not uncommon for a rookie, all it's going to take is 1 or 2 slip-ups from an offensive lineman against an incredible Ravens defensive front, and Madubuike has a real solid potential to get out of this drought a little bit and have 1 or even multiple sacks this week, because this is probably going to be a pretty high-scoring game, I would think. I know Denver's defense is solid, but it's hard to keep the Ravens offense down for too long. I don't know how much Deontay Johnson's going to play or how much of a factor that's going to be. I know a lot of the offensive people are fading Johnson and Zay Flowers, but I still think this might be something where there's a good bit of scoring. It's going to be a good bit of opportunity for him. And he's still playing great snaps. He played 86% of snaps last week, which again is elite territory for an interior defensive lineman. So he's going to have the opportunity. He has the talent. And so I don't know what the line is going to end up being with him, but I'd imagine it might be pretty advantageous given he's being faded so much in fantasy circles in general as look at the big slump he's in. I wouldn't write him off. If you're in a league with me and you want to trade him to me, I'll take him from you. Pass him right along.
Yep. Yeah, that just means all that production is going to be backloaded instead of front loaded, because he's still doing the same things he did last year. He's still applying pressure, and he's still a great player. We just haven't seen the production yet, which means it's still coming. Yeah, I'm with you on that. And then also 10-point spread in this game. Baltimore's favored by 10. So there's a great chance that Denver ends up in a negative game script early and often and has to pass way more than they want to, creating more opportunity for Madubuike to get there.
Yeah, absolutely. Love it.
Yeah, good stuff. Good stuff. Okay, I got one that I don't know how much I like, but it is technically a bonus bet. Good price though. So I was thinking Bobby Okereke, who was not everyone's favorite person until last week, where he had his best game of the season, over 8.5 combined tackles at plus 115. That's a pretty good price, up against a Washington team that loves to run the ball and where Jaden Daniels takes off a ton on top of that. So Washington is the 3rd best rushing attack in the league. They're allowing 17 tackles per game to opposing linebackers. That is only 13th overall, but we're coming off Okereke's, like I said, best game of the season And I'd be shocked if Washington didn't just annihilate the Giants this week and we get some salting the clock away carries, which would always be helpful for Okereke if he's not at that line by the time we need him to be there. So I don't know. What do you think? Are you an Okereke believer after last week, or are you still jumping ship, or what do you think of this one?
So I didn't jump ship. He was a hold for me. You know, I do most of my fantasy football is either best ball or dynasty. So, you know, I only do a couple of IDP redraft. I've just really started dabbling in the week-to-week props. But I know he has the talent. I know he's done it before. If it was a player who maybe started off and had 2 awesome weeks to start the season, and so we were all on board, and then he had a slump, and this was the first season that he'd produced, I'd be a lot more concerned than someone who has the track record already in his career that he has. So we know he can do it and has done it routinely. And so I think last week is closer to the rule than the exception for him. And these past weeks that haven't been, you know, that have been a disappointment for fantasy managers and people who have been looking at him for IDP bets, I think those are more of the anomaly. So I like him to continue this bounce back. I love the fact that these are all, because I'm so used to thinking in terms of solos versus assists, and solos are worth 2 and assists are worth 1. I love when you start to get into these combined props because, you know, it doesn't take quite as much to get there. And so I think that he's definitely got that path, especially if it ends up being a blowout, which would also be great for Dorrance Armstrong, because that means the Giants are going to be passing like crazy to try to catch back up, and St. Juice too. So I think we're just hammering this matchup from all angles.
I think it will be. I think it will be a Washington blowout. These are not the same teams we saw in week 2 when Jaden Daniels had played a game, un game. You know, he's coming off the greatest play we've seen this entire season last week. And, you know, they hung with Baltimore the week before that. Like, this is a really good Washington team, and New York's gone backwards since then. So I think we might get the bloodbath. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. That's all I got for bonus bets. You got any more on your end?
I've got one more, and this is in part to show that I don't just have tunnel vision. And that is, it's still a defensive lineman and it's still a sack prop. So I've got some tunnel vision. But DeForest Buckner for the Colts. The reasons why I like this matchup are very different from the other players I've talked about. Whereas a lot of the other quarterbacks that I like targeting are quarterbacks who run into pressure, Darnold has done a good job of avoiding pressure this season. Only 3 of the sacks this season have been attributed to him out of the 11 times that he's been sacked over the past 3 weeks. I'm sorry, not over the season. But they are still giving up sacks, and it's because the offensive line has been playing poorly. I know Darashaw went down, and they got a replacement in Cam Robinson, who's going to be acclimating. But that's not really Buckner's concern. Buckner doesn't move around quite as much as some of the other players, and he's most likely to be drawing Ed Ingram. Ed Ingram's pass pro grade on PFF right now for this season is a whopping 48, which makes him 67th out of 72 eligible players. So the issues that the Vikings have been facing in terms of allowing pressure have to do with the offensive line, and it doesn't seem like that's getting any better this week. Buckner's coming back from injury, so his snaps aren't where they were a lot of last season. He was only right at 61% last week, his first week back after injury, which makes this a little bit riskier than I would typically like in terms of wanting to see higher snap shares. But that individual matchup that he's likely to get and the problems that Vikings offensive line has had are some things that draw me to him. And again, I never get to talk about guys like him in my streaming because he's rostered in every league. So I had to talk about a few players at least who I really like and I think are in a prime position to score this week that just are not going to be eligible for the normal stuff that I do for the show.
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong. He had a sack last week, first game back, even with the reduced snap count and all that. He was fine. Yeah.
Yeah. He's got the talent where it doesn't take much. I mean, I still want to see. I love talent plus snaps. That's why I love Matabike. That's why I'm a big fan of Zach Allen. Buckner has the talent, and he has played more snaps before. And like you said, he performs even without them. And so I think that he's in a really prime spot here.
Yeah, I'm with you. And and it's do or die for the Colts team. They just made that Flacco move. They're going all out this game Sunday night, I think it is. Yeah, it should be a good one. Yeah.
Mhm.
All right, that pretty much does it for us. Scott, do me a huge favor. Tell the people where they can find you, what you're working on this year, and then please, if you could tell us a little bit about the state of IDP survey too, for all the listeners and watchers, so that hopefully we can get some additional results on that.
Yeah, so I've been doing weekly defensive lineman streaming this season for the IDP show. In that work that I put out usually every Wednesday, it has 12 players featured, 6 defensive tackles, 6 defensive ends, in case you're in leagues that have those designations. And the thing about all these players is they are highly available. So I have them in 2 categories: players that are available in at least 75% of leagues on MFL, and players that are available in at least 90%. So these are deep sleepers. These are players you're not going to find in most analyst rankings to be able to sort of pick through and comb through to help you with your decisions. So we've been tracking that. I do a little write-up about how they stack up relative to the criteria that's in the statistical model that I use each week. And, bumpy start to the season, as is the case when we're starting off most seasons and we don't have fresh data to use, but have been doing really well for the past few weeks. And a lot of the guys that I was calling out early in the season are in the top 10, top 15, top 20 for the individual position season long, and no longer eligible for the article because people are scooping them up and like the Derek Halls of the world, who I was just riding week after week after week until the market caught up. And so now it's just a matter of trying to find new guys. And I really enjoy doing that. And I'm still modeling all of the defensive linemen in the NFL. So always open for DMs and questions about, if I would play someone else instead, since I'm not putting out the exhaustive lists. And then the state of IDP has been a passion project for me for 3 years now. This is the 4th year we're doing it. The first time with the weight of the show behind it, which I'm really grateful for, including adding in things like some gift paid subscriptions to the site. I'm also suggesting that you nominate charities, and I'm going to make donations to a few charities that I'll select at the end of the whole experience. But it's a short survey. It takes about 5 minutes. And the whole point of it is so that we can learn more about your IDP leagues. And this is something that I don't hoard. I publish this data publicly. So the entire IDP content creation machine can see where we're doing a good job of addressing your needs, where we might be missing things, what are some things that we need to do a better job of disclosing in terms of our assumptions before we give you data or give you recommendations that might be helpful. So again, survey only takes less than 5 minutes per league. You can win something for yourself. You can nominate and do something good for a charity. The link is at the bottom of every single one of the articles that I put out that are all free over on the IDP show. It's pinned on my Twitter at ProfessorIDP. So that is the big thing. And I'll keep it running all through the playoffs, close it, do some analyses, and I'll probably be writing it up around February before we start getting into very early best ball drafts and the next rookie season, which are both things that I do a lot of in the off season.
That's beautiful, man. And I love seeing the results every year and seeing how much IDP grows every year, because it's come a long way. I mean, just real quick, 30,000-foot view from when you started doing that to now. How much growth are we talking about?
Yeah, so the growth in responses, I know I'm still only getting the tip of the iceberg, which is why I'm really just begging people to get this out there and tell your friend, tell your neighbor, tell anyone you know who knows what IDP is to fill the survey out. But we've seen growth from the first year I did it. I only got about 100 responses, and it was still great with those 100 responses to know, okay, how many leagues are on Sleeper that are only using 3 defensive positions versus MFL, which are using 5. Back then, MFL hadn't gone to true position yet. So it was how many leagues are using true position and how many aren't. So we can learn all of these things. Scoring systems are forever the bane of the existence of IDP analysts and content creators. So getting a sense of where the trends are. I can assume that we have growth in the overall IDP space because we're up to over 300 leagues last year in terms of responses. This season is well on track to exceed that by a great margin. So it feels like IDP might be growing, but what is definitely growing is our knowledge of the IDP community. And that also provides you options as the person filling it out and reading it to have ideas for your leagues about, oh, I never thought about doing a guillotine IDP league, or doing some of this modified best ball stuff that I love so much in my dynasty leagues. And it can give you some ideas for different ways that you might be able to spice up your league. So it seems like our knowledge base is definitely growing, which is only going to help us to do more to help all the IDP players like we are, and to really grow the community even more.
That's beautiful, man. I love it. And you're right. Variety is the spice of life. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Scott, thank you so much, man. I really appreciate it. Glad you came on. Love the bets. Love that you have the guts to do sack props, because I certainly don't. So thank you so much.
Yeah, it's great being on with you. Thanks.
All right. Before we get out of here, please subscribe to our YouTube channel for our other shows, the flagship IDP Show podcast, the IDP After Show, the IDP Trade Show, and IDP Drafts. If you'd like to support the show, you can do so for just $5 a month over at theidpshow.com. We've got premium features for paid supporters that we know you'll enjoy. Follow us on Twitter at the IDP Show, all one word. Thank you for listening, and good luck in week 9, everyone. Hope you guys have a good one and that those bets work out. And we'll see you same time, same place next week. Take care. Bye-bye.